Welcome to the Inconvenient Minority Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Xu. And joining me today is Vince Dao. Vince Dao is a popular commentator and Vietnamese American with a platform dedicating to setting the record straight on conservatism, identity politics, and race. Vince, great talk with you today.
Yeah, happy to be here, man. It's good to be here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, one of the ways that I got acquainted with you was your work on California Proposition 16. Um, for the audience, just to give a review for the audience, California Proposition 16 was a measure that was introduced to reintroduce race preferences in admissions, employment, and hiring. Obviously, that would, drastically lower the number of Asians in a lot of universities, and more importantly, fundamentally compromise some of these ideals of meritocracy that are really important. And then obviously you did a little bit of work on that. Do you want to tell me a little bit about, or tell us a little bit about what you were able to do there?
Yeah, I mainly just, was sort of a social media ambassador for the No on 16 campaign. I spoke at like a rally or two regarding it. But it was really a sort of an interesting. It was a grassroots fight, I would say. I think the No on 16 campaign had really good organizing, and it was pretty interesting to see this year. It kind of tells you a lot about the actual people in California. That, of course, as usual, they voted Democrat all down the ballot. But then when you look at a lot of the ballot propositions, they actually voted pretty conservative. So it kind of makes you question like what's on the minds of the electorate here. But
Yeah, it just seems like even in these very liberal states, right, like California, very liberal state, 50%, 57% of voters, including majorities of Asians and Latino Americans, voted against Proposition 16 to reintroduce race preferences in admissions. It just seems like when you tell the story pretty honestly, it just seems like people, even if it might potentially benefit their race, people just generally seem leery about using race in merit-based processes.
yeah, no, and the thing is, Prop 16 was helped by the fact that the wording was all woke. I don't remember the exact wording of the proposition, but it
Yeah,
sounded something like
reintroduce diversity.
exactly
That's what it
reintroduce
said,
diversity.
diversity.
And you would think, "Oh, the people of California surely must vote for this." So listen how woke it sounds, but it's pretty interesting. It actually got defeated. Like they probably were looking at that and saying, "Oh, this is some stupid social justice crap. Let me vote against this." But then they vote down ballot for Democrats. It's kind of a weird state, but
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so weird. Um, but yeah, I mean, so y you know, we'll get to Proposition 16 again, I'm sure, in the podcast. But first, I wanted to kind of, you know, ask you a little bit of questions. You are Vietnamese American, right?
yes.
Are you second gen? Like, are your parents from Vietnam, or first gen, or third gen, or what?
I guess well, first gen born in America, right? So that would be make me
Hmm.
second gen, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Second gen, second gen. If you're born in America, you're second gen. Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Or yeah. So when Vietnamese Americans are really interesting, are a really interesting group. Evidently, Vietnamese Americans are some of the more conservative, just at least in values and even voting to the extent they ever participate in politics. Some of the more conservative American groups in America today. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a simple answer. I think it's the same reason why you see a lot of Cubans and Venezuelan Americans voting conservative is because, we came to this country, most of us in the, that first major immigration wave was like in the 70s and 80s. Most of us came here fleeing what we saw as the radical extreme of leftism. And, and we came over here and we're like, we don't want anything that remotely resembles that taking hold in our country ever again. That's what we came running from. And so inherently we're much more conservative culture. And I would argue that most Asian cultures are very conservative, but the Vietnamese, and I guess probably many Chinese Americans too, they just because they like saw it firsthand, they saw the logical extremes, they're like extra scared of progressivism, of leftism, and they want to preserve, their conservative culture.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, I think you're right, right? I think a lot of Asian American groups are like inherently conservative. If you know, many of them immigrated from communist, socialist countries. If you didn't, um, you know, Asian Americans, tend to emphasize family, at least family values coming in here. those kinds of things. So what then that just kind of brings a paradox too, because I know actually Trump gained quite a few Asian American votes in the latest exit polls in 2020, where he was able to win, I think, significantly more than in the 2018 midterm elections. But even so, about like 63, 64% of Asian Americans still voted for Joe Biden. Why do you think that's the case?
Well, firstly, I think I've noticed this in the Vietnamese community, which is that um, it's those immigrants that came over in the 70s and 80s, they're very conservative, but a lot of them also are not that involved in politics, but it's their kids, right? Now that Asian Americans are in America, they're having kids and they're sending their Asian kids to these Western public schools where you know what gets taught there, right? But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
also think about this, it's like it's even worse with Asians because Asians teach their kids to pay attention and be really good in school. And so if you're paying attention a lot in school, what are you paying attention to, right? So I think that's probably the main driving force in it is that it's more the young, like Americanized Asian kids that are more involved in politics. But I also think, there is sort of this stereotype. I don't know so much if it's true for the Vietnamese, but I'm sure with other Asian groups, there is just this stereotype that like, Democrats are on the side of immigrants and, they just, you just come over here, you're supposed to vote Democrat. Most people have a herd mentality, right? So you vote the way the people around you are voting. But I think mainly I would say it's probably the kids that are the driving factor in that. That's why Vietnamese Americans out here in like Southern California are no longer a lock for the Republican Party. It's not because the older people changed their minds, it's because the younger people have been brainwashed by ironically, right? Ironically, the American public school system, and then now they're the ones voting leftist and they're the ones controlling the electorate basically for Vietnamese people.
Okay, so a bit of a challenge or challenging question here. So, if you say that a lot of the people who got an American education, tended to lean further to the left than their parents and things like that because they perceive that the Democrats are, the party of, immigrants and helping immigrant communities and things like that. Um, I mean, would you say that? I mean, would you say that Democrats are not the party of immigrants? And why would you say that?
Well, I don't think that there is a like I think they definitely make a strong appeal to immigrants, right? But I don't think I wouldn't say that there is one party of immigrants or of not immigrants. It's like okay, if you're here and you're a citizen, which means you're voting, technically were still an immigrant, but at that point you're more of an American, right? You are here, you've been naturalized. So I think in terms of voting, it's like, what does it matter? You're already a citizen. But I would say Democrats are definitely a party that favors looser immigration, right? Both legal and illegal. They just in general want more mass migration. But I would also argue that many legal immigrants here in the United States of all ethnic groups, actually, it might be kind of ironic, but are opposed to that, right? They're the ones who are like, I came here legally, I came here through a strict process. It's not fair that these other people get to cut the line, and in some cases it's just like it's even more selfish than that in some cases, just like I don't want I came here, I established myself, now I don't want, you know, new immigrants lowering my wages, taking my jobs, right? And that's how it goes. But Democrats are definitely a party seeking looser immigration, but definitely actually it does not benefit people who've already immigrated to America. In many cases, it hurts them even more.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. People don't seem to understand that. There's a sense of. I mean, if you came here and the legal legal immigration process is pretty tough. Like you have to run through a few hoops and things like that. You have to get visas here and there. Sometimes there's a lottery aspect to it, and when you make it and things like that, and then you definitely you don't want somebody to. I mean, it's not fair when somebody cuts you in line and comes and receives all the benefits of being an American citizen without going through the same process that you went through. And so for me, that's what always, and it's not only even that, Vince, because in California, which houses and is a sanctuary place to many illegal immigrants, a lot of these illegal immigrants also get a lot of different benefits that are actually driven specifically for illegal immigrants. Like there was that California Dream Act of 2011, which was given to state colleges and universities that gave out scholarships that were specifically for illegal immigrants or children of illegal immigrants. And those same scholarships were not available to people who were legal immigrants, who came here legally. And that just to me is kind of a backwards mentality in terms of who are we going to prioritize here? Are we going to prioritize the people who came here legally or the people who came here illegally? Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think most legal immigrants would prefer that they are the ones that get the priority. And it's not just, oh, we would want the priority, but it's also it's an issue of fairness, you know. Why should people who came here illegally get the same benefits as people who came here legally? That in a sense creates a distinction that it doesn't matter how you come here, which as you can predict, as you could expect, completely shatters and breaks the immigration system.
No, that's really important. It's interesting. Part of the reason why I wanted to bring you along was because you have an interesting story about the way that you came into politics, and also about the way that people reacted to you first starting to speak out. Um, so, what made you first start to get involved into politics, especially on the conservative end? What really triggered that? Oh, even though all of my classmates seem kind of woke and liberal, I'm not going to be that way.
Yeah, so the whole how I became a conservative is kind of a long story, but the basically I've always kind of found politics to be interesting, mainly because I liked history a lot growing up, right? And so I guess it's just a logical extreme that if you like history, then you're going to be drawn to politics too. But when I was in about to start 10th grade, I was a conservative by then. I just couldn't put up with it anymore. I was like, "Man, like, all my classmates are so woke, and this is kind of it's like I wanna be able to actually have a platform where I can express myself too, you know, because it's like we live in this echo chamber, but I was like, I know I'm not gonna just go up, be that person in class that's like always talking crap. Like I want like an actual proper platform where I can do this. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna start doing this on social media and see where it takes me, you know, because I already sort of like back then I wanted to be a journalist as well. So I was like, why don't I just turn this into commentator and become a commentator? And then I was like, okay, let's try this. And ever since then, I guess that's how it all started.
There you go. There you go. But of course, the classmates reacted to some
Oh
of
yeah.
your social media. Yeah, they certainly reacted. They wanted to deny you, according to what you were saying. I was reading your post about your high school classmates wanting to deny you the ability to give your speech at your own high school graduation. I mean, what was the culture like there? I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's still ongoing. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I they've come in waves. Like it's
Wait, first of
occasionally
all, why were you given the opportunity to give a speech at graduation?
because I'm projected to be a valedictorian, right? Because I'm the number one class rank, right? So that's automatic. You get it. Like I guarantee, like even though I'm probably the best public speaker in the class, they probably deny me, find any chance to deny me if I was to try out speaker. But unfortunately, they can't do that, right? But
Yeah, exactly. Yep, too
no,
bad.
the they have come
Until
in.
they eliminate class ranks. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly, they limited class
Yeah,
ranks. Yeah,
yeah.
so it's happened a few different times in high school, actually, like what you're referring, that's just the most recent one, and that was the worst time it happened. But, there have just been times where people just get really angry that I exist, basically, and I don't know how much you look through that Twitter thread, but you'll see one of the emails was literally saying, like, "Vince Dao is a conservative and a Trump supporter, he shouldn't be allowed to go to the same school as me." Like, that was literally the premise of one of the emails, like, not the brightest kid. I don't think that sent that email, but they they've like done this several times, but this time around, I guess they were talking to someone who has a friend who's a former valedictorian at our school, and she was saying that um valedictorians make the speeches at graduation and you guys shouldn't want him representing your class, so you guys should email the principal. And then like all that person and their friends were like, yeah, let's do that. So they started an email campaign. They failed because the principal is a cool guy and he's like, that's the stupidest reason ever, that you guys just don't like his political views, so like that's not how this works, you know. I was like, okay, so good on you, Mr. Principal. um but it went a little bit further than that. Like one kid from school doxed me on online. Like he just put my address out there, and a lot of other stuff was done and said. But yeah, that it just happens periodically at my school. It's like every year, I think. Every year since I've done it, it's happened at least once. Like my sophomore year, it happened. My junior year, it happened. I'm sure at some point it'll happen this year. I don't know when. I'm just waiting for it to happen. But yeah, kids at school don't like me.
That's crazy. I mean, that's I mean, that's crazy. I mean, Vince, I mean, you and I are similar in that regard. When I was in high school and then also into college, when I was in high school, I remember attending um, uh, the Gay Straight Alliance at my high school, and which you know, uh, which at the time, you know, the big battle at the time wasn't about gayness or straightness, it was about transgenderism. And it was about, basically men and women. And there's this and I attended because I was curious, because I was interested in discussing. And somebody made a contention at that meeting. They're like, yeah, men are not different from women, like at all. And, and I remember, like, at that point I was just like, okay, well, I have to, like, at least, because no one was saying anything. People were just like completely letting it go, like that entire contention and completely letting it go. And so finally I was just like, I raised my hand and I was like, so, like, when you say like at all, you don't even mean like biologically. Like, we know that, men have penises and women have like vaginas, right? And they were like, nope. Like, and I was like, wait, what do you mean no? And they're like, nope. And I was like, that's like a biological reality. And then some people just like started to get mad at me for saying that men have penises, and like that's something women don't have. And I remember, Vince, the next day I went to I mean, I got called by the school administration, into the administrator's office. And, I was thinking, like, what happened? What did I do? And I forget if it was the vice principal or the principal or somebody, they said, yeah, you were reported to harassment, intimidation, bullying. And I said, for what? And they said, oh, your participation in that meeting, the Gay Straight Alliance meeting. And
Oh,
I said, well, what did they said? They said, well, you made people feel uncomfortable. And I said, I asked a question, and they said, look, we're going to review this and we're going to get back to you. And, at the time, like, I was student liaison of the school. I was representing the school in school board meetings. I could have a lot of things stripped of me and those kinds of positions and stuff. And
wow.
they came back to me and I said, look, I wasn't there to attack anyone. I was just there to discuss, to debate. And then they come back to me and they're like, yeah, okay, look, Kenny, like, we're not going to, we're going to let this one go. But, like, that's because you said your intention was to debate. And I get that you like to debate and stuff, but, like, those, people, but I
You hurt
suggest
their
that we,
feelings,
like,
and
never
you
come,
did the
yeah,
grand crime of hurting their feelings.
right. You hurt their feelings. So, like, you need to go back and, like, not, like, you need to, like, not go back to that place again. And this is like me, and I was like in high school, and I was like, what? Like, this just did not. I was like, I thought this place was like supposed to be a place of intellectual exploration. It's a public meeting, and I asked a question, but it just turns out like this is the way our culture is going, right? It's like, not, if you dare to say anything different, you know, you face risks. And so that's why, like, I really wanted to congratulate you on what you're doing.
Uh-huh, thank you. No, yeah, and this is it's kind of concerning because a lot of people always look at, kids like that and say, once they're in the real world, they'll grow up, they'll figure it out. But the problem is we're letting this go so far that it's like this is becoming the real world, you know? You see all these corporations and, you know, big businesses adopting all this woke culture, teaching critical race theory, you know, posting those black squares and those black fists all over their social media and having these tolerance and diversity trainings like every major corporation, you know? So it's like if we don't take control of this soon, it's like it's very concerning because this is becoming the real world, and crap like this is genuinely just how you destroy our society, or at least destroy what makes society great. It's not going to be very good if people like are this weak and with throughout the whole society. Um, so we should take control of this, but I don't have an easy solution for that.
It's amazing that you're like valedictorian of the school, and it's funny that it's just people want you to not be able to speak because of your political views. Even though as a valedictorian you get a certain privilege as valid, just like most valedictorians in most schools in America, like they give the speech, and that's your right, and that's determined by merit, right? By the merit, by the merit system. And I think that what we're seeing in your case is kind of symbolic of that. In this world today, we're starting to see a system where it's just politics that determines, where you go. And the whole idea of merit and judging you just based on, the relevant factors that are important is, I think that's going by the wayside right now. I think people really just want to make things political. It's very sad.
No, that's actually a great point. That's a great connection. Yeah, it's and you know they value diversity more than quality, right? It's like they know as long as we fulfill this racial quota where we have XYZ number of minorities and women in the spot, then we're fine, you know. And that's no way to run a society, you know, and there's no way to run America. America was built off the meritocracy, you know, that we people came here from other places. They a lot of them were different, you know, and the common consensus was we don't care where you come from, we don't care what your past is. Now you're here and you're here to work, you know, and then now it's like we just have diversity means nothing, you know, ultimately. And it doesn't I mean, people don't like to say this, but diversity actually really contributes absolutely nothing positive, right? It can be neutral. Sometimes it's actually negative if you're terms of a country, you know, but generally speaking,
But by diversity, you mean diversity based on race, right? Like racial diversity.
everything, yeah, race. But I'm talking about, you know, as a
Well, I
country.
would I would say I would say, you know, having different opinions and truly different, you know, people of different people who have different intellectual things to offer that might offer a greater semblance of discussion. But I think that a couple points regarding that, which I mean, look, I mainly agree with you. Like racial diversity, and just because you're a certain race doesn't mean you have a different opinion to offer. Okay. I know people of all different races saying the exact same thing at college campuses. It doesn't matter what race they are, they're saying the exact same thing. They're not diverse. They're not intellectually diverse. They are racially diverse, but that really doesn't mean anything in terms of contributing to the discussion. Two, um, to really be able to get the benefits of intellectual diversity, you have to have an environment where people are actually allowed to share, their different intellects and their different opinions. And so if you actually suppress certain opinions and certain sides and you don't even get the benefits of intellectual diversity, you just inspire resentment, in the people who are in the opposite side. Which is why a lot of conservatives right now feel pretty suppressed from the discourse, because even though they have something to contribute in terms of the intellectual side of the conversation, they're not they're not able to, and they're suppressed from that. Go ahead.
Well, let me clarify what I was saying. So, in terms of intellectual discourse, yeah, that's great. Like, if you're going to school, you want to hear as many different viewpoints as possible, right? But what I'm talking about is that as a country, you know, the more diverse people's ideas are, that doesn't always mean things are better, right? As a entire country, because we have to have some type of shared values, right? We have some type of shared ideas. And a concern I see now in America is we share nothing in common, right? We never really shared any common race in common. Now the religion thing is basically gone. We don't share a common religion, barely is a common language. The only thing that's ever held America together really is, you know, it's shared ideals, it's shared values, and we don't have that anymore, you know, and that something has to bind a, Joe Biden always talks about unity. You hear them a lot, but in order to unite, you have to unite on something. Like, what do we share? And then we live in a diverse society. Okay, great, but what do we actually like share in common? And if the answer is we can't even share values in common as Americans, then we really have nothing. That's part of the reason why we're so divided right now. We don't share anything in common. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. We don't share. Supposedly we share the foundational ideas of the American founding and then the progression through the founding, right? So I mean, the idea that one, everybody is born equal, or every no not yeah, everybody should be treated equally. Should not be treated according to their race or their religion and those kinds of things. Should be treated based on their character, their merit. I think that's critical to the American dream. And then two, like we have a shared responsibility to protect this land for our children, those kinds of things, to respect the other side, to tolerate the other person, and and those kinds of things. And I think that is kind of is leaving our country as well. So I think you're right. I think there is a degradation of shared norms that's going on today in society.
mhm, absolutely.
It's you definitely, and audiences who don't know Vince will probably be surprised for me to share this fact that he's still in high school because of the depth and level of the conversation that we're having. But you do have a very young fan base, and I mean, what's your advice that you have for them regarding getting involved in contentious topics like politics?
Uh, you only A lot of people are scared to lose friends. You're probably look, you're gonna lose friends. You're gonna lose following initially. You're gonna get a lot of heat for it. But I would argue, and this is kind of cliche. You probably heard your parents say this, but it's true. It's like 10 years from now, you're not gonna remember that, but you will remember the fact that you stood for something. And then that's what I would argue is like for people who want to speak out, I encourage them to do it. Be smart about it. Always pick your battles, pick the right battles. Know the time and place, right? Optics are very important. So if you're going to be the contentious conservative kid, they're always going to be looking for ways and reasons to cancel you and destroy you. So always have good optics. Present yourself, keep a good image. Um, but if that's something you've even thought about doing, I fully encourage you to do it, because I would say in the end it's worth it because you've contributed something positive to this common culture where we're all fighting. But I'd also argue that it feels good. It feels good to not have to hide who you are. And if you're friends with people that you have to hide who you are, or pretend to be someone else to be their friend, then you're not really friends with them. Someone else is friends with them, right? That's not you. So I would argue like just do it.
Yeah. Dude, that's awesome advice. And I mean, I agree with you. I you know I remember, back in high school, I don't remember the people and the critics who gave me flack for, starting my own Christian group at Princeton High School, or I don't remember the names of the journalists who published little asides and articles about me and the Davidsonian when I was at Davidson College, starting my own Young Americans for Freedom chapter. I don't remember those names. I don't really remember the critics. I do remember a few or a couple, just because they were especially annoying. Um, but what I do remember is, I remember, you know, the time that I was able to change a few hearts and change a few minds, bring speakers to campus, to college campuses, publish in the newspaper, publish my ideas, share things with people, I remember the many enlightening discussions I had with my professors and my teachers, at least the ones that would give me the time of day. And I think that those made me a better and a tougher person. And I think right now it's so interesting, Vince. We live in a culture where a lot of young people are, um, um, I would say, don't know how to handle tough conversations and don't know how to handle people firing criticism and questions at them, and that's not going to help the culture of our country. So if we need a few tough minds out there, and sometimes the only way that you're going to be toughened is if you put yourself through the fire a little bit. And so I'm really glad that like you're putting yourself through the fire, because it's sharpening your minds, it's sharpening the minds of your listeners, and it's making a big difference, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, man, and I encourage everyone who's out there considering starting, whether it's a YAF chapter, a Turning Point chapter, s- start posting on social media, work for a campaign, whatever it is. I encourage you all to get out there, try it, and do it.
Vince, how can people follow you and follow your journey and everything like that?
Yes, I'm available on most social media. My username is the Vince Dao, and my YouTube channel is just Vince Dao. I'd say subscribe to my YouTube, follow me on Instagram. Those are probably the two best places to find me.
Sounds good, Vince. Well, it's great talking with you, and thanks for talking with me again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you very much.
Hi, welcome back to the Inconvenient Minority Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Shu. Look, Vince Dao and I, we had a great conversation. It's pretty lighthearted. Just want to touch on a couple of things here. First, I want to talk about college, okay, and high school. So in the school system, Vince and I were both pretty young people. He's a young Asian American conservative. I'm a somewhat older. I'm also pretty young Asian American as well. And we were talking a lot about the school system and what it's like. And I just want to flesh this out for you. The things that he was talking about in his high school, people reporting him for bullying, people saying he shouldn't speak at the valedictorian speech because of his political views. Like, these are common occurrences in high schools and in colleges today. Okay, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself and my own story. Look, when I was at Davidson College, I was running for student government. I was running for student senate. I was the president of my Young Americans for Freedom chapter. I was obviously an open conservative. Everybody knew who I was. But at the time, I was like, oh, I'm a conservative. That's cool. We all like intellectual diversity and things like that. That's nice. So I put up all these posters, think, oh, people would like this kind of stuff. Well, the day of the election, here comes this guy. He's about 2 grades older than me, just a complete social justice warrior. Posts on the campus Facebook page the day of the election when people were actually voting. Hey guys, I'm not sure if you've heard about this guy, Kenny Shu, but let me tell you about him. He misquotes all of my articles that I've ever written, tries to put it in like the worst possible context ever, tries to imply that I'm some kind of misogynist or something, like I'm some kind of racist or something like that. And then like literally says, well, I'm not going to tell you guys how to vote, but figure it out how you want to vote. And it got like 150 likes, and it got like 200 comments. It started this gigantic flame war in our school the day of the Senate elections. It was about me. He took this post of his. I'm almost impressed by the effort. It took like 8 hours. It took 8 hours, must have like taken 8 hours of his time just to make this post, to dig up all of my articles and to just post this entire thing just to hate me, just because he hated my political views. This guy Nicholas would say such a thing, and it's just that was the first time, that I thought in my head. That was the first time that I realized, oh wow, like there are people who really don't like me, who really are opposed to what I do or what I'm trying to do, who just don't like the fact that there are conservative views on this campus. So like I went to so anyway, funny long story short, I confronted him about this. And there was even a moment when, I went up to him and we said, "Hey, can we like get tea or something like that?" And he was like, "Do you want some tea?" And I'm like, "Okay, fine, I'll get some tea with you." So I went to his room, we got tea. And during his tea, he says, "Yeah, I'm not going to apologize for what I said. I knew what I said." And I was like, "Why did you do that? We never even met each other. I never had a problem with you. You just didn't like me because of my political views." And he was like, "That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I just want to stop this campus from having people like you and who believe in things that you do." And I was like, "Do you have a problem with me?" He's like, "No, I have no problem with you." I'm like, "Then why did you do it?" He said, "Because of your political views." So Vince Dow's story, my story, it's all the same thing. It's part of the same thread. There is a cottage industry in school systems right now that trains people to do this, to cancel other people. It is just the case. It happened in my experience, it happened in Vince's experience. It strikes particularly harder if you're a minority. On my campus, I started this campus alternative newspaper. As you can see, I'm not easily dissuaded. I'm not easily discouraged. I started an alternative campus newspaper to house some different perspectives, and not every perspective that I showed was conservative. I mean, there are plenty of liberals who subscribe to my paper as well. The Davidson Mirror, we would give it out for free at our liberal arts college. It would always cause a great discussion. A lot of people really enjoyed it. But there's this one guy, he was a black guy, who wrote an article about the segregation that was prevalent at fraternities, okay, at Davidson College. And at Davidson College, he had a point. Look, he had a point. There was a black student coalition that had a lot of black students, but then a lot of the white fraternities were not communicating with the black fraternities, and a lot of the white fraternities, had some token black people in it, but it didn't seem conducive. It didn't seem like the campus was conducive of a campus climate where there were, where people were of different races were mingling and learning each other out. And, he blames it on both sides. He said, look, the white people did not really get a chance to learn about the other side, but then so did the black people. The black people didn't get a chance to learn about the other side either, There's something at work here. And there's kind of a racial tension that's going on, and that needs to be resolved. We need to come together, and he does in some cases blame some of the black people at his fraternity as well as blaming the white people as well. And he got huge criticism from this, particularly from the black social justice crowd. And he was black, by the way. The writer, if I didn't say it already, he was black. And he got huge criticism of it. People were just shouting him down, saying, are you saying that we're not allowed to celebrate Black Pride or whatever? Or are you saying like we're not allowed to, experience joy away from white people? And I just remember he was relentlessly criticized over the internet. And it was so sad. It took a toll on his mental health. I'm not saying that was the only thing that drove him, but there were other things that happened as well. But I mean, it took a toll on his mental health. It took a whole toll on my mental health. It made me realize, wow, there are like real consequences to speaking out. And this is not something to say like I want to discourage you from speaking out, or I want to discourage you from saying the issues. I'm just saying anticipate the attacks and be resilient. Be resilient to criticism, because this is what is happening at our colleges, at our high school campuses right now. Okay, free speech is becoming something of something that people turn against that. And when I went to Davidson College, I wasn't even particularly political. I mean, yeah, I was conservative, but I did not really want to get involved with the issues. I kind of wanted to stay in my lane. But it quickly became apparent to me that Davidson College was not the place. It was not a place where free speech, where a diversity of views was going to be tolerated. And so I had to find a way out of that. I had to say, because I believed that if you learn ideas from different perspectives, you will get better. And partially that was a result of my Christian upbringing and the Christian faith that I still hold today. I mean, think about it. As Christians and Christian thinking becomes increasingly marginalized in society, it's like you say, oh, what's the path to success in the world? Oh, make money, be famous. Nowhere does anybody say serve God. So I always feel compelled to say, well, what if there are things that are more important than that? What are things more important than that? So I was used to in high school having my views marginalized because I went to a very liberal, secular, lots of secular Jewish people, lots of atheist people, lots of agnostic people. I went to a high school that had a lot of that. So I was used to having my views criticized, and I was fine with having my views criticized. In fact, I started a debate club where we could debate religion. Imagine, my entire life I was focusing on politics and religion, the two things that Generation Xers don't like to talk about. But when I went to Davidson College, I realized that it wasn't even people were criticizing me. They just knew that they didn't want to argue with me because they knew that I would win. So they just tried to cancel me, and they tried to strategically destroy me and disrepute me. And, I became the hottest name on campus for that. The most notorious person on campus at Davidson for that. That's what's happening. That's what's happening in high school campuses. That's what's happening in college campuses today, which brings me to this second pivot topic that I want to talk about, which is about diversity. Okay, Vince and I think we clearly explain it pretty well. The kind of diversity that matters in a school is not racial diversity. It really isn't. And this is, by the way, if you listen to my podcast intro, I start off with this claim that diversity is our strength. It's not that they want diversity, it's that they want sameness. The woke left does not want diversity, guys. You guys need to think this is stupid. This is like the lamest argument in the world to say that, oh, we want diversity. No, you don't. No, you don't. What is the diversity that matters? If you have everybody in the same skin color coming together and saying the same thing, is that a diverse class of people? Is that a diverse audience? No, it's not. It's the same audience, and they're teaching sameness. When I was at Davidson, I went to a diversity seminar. You know what this diversity seminar said? It was taught by this anthropology professor. It was mandatory, by the way. Everybody had to go. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. And it was mandatory. Everybody had to go. This professor comes up and she says, up here at the top, you have white people, and then down here you have black people, and then she puts Asian people like in the middle. And so there was a pyramid of oppression that she was giving, the classic pyramid of oppression. And I went to this pathways of privilege walk where you had to like check boxes if you were white, and then check, and then you had to like step forward to say, this is how much unearned privilege you have because you're white, or this is how much unearned privilege you have because you were born in a 2-parent family or whatever. I'm like, yeah, okay. So I remember confronting them and I was like, okay, so yeah, I have privilege because of X and X. What am I supposed to do about it? And they're like, oh, just think about it, like interrogate about it. Like, what? No. If you have privilege in society, and by the way, being white itself, I mean, it's debatable whether white privilege is a thing to the but it's certainly not a thing to the extent the woke left wants it to be. And we'll go into this topic of whiteness later because it's so interesting to me. But if I have privilege, if you have privilege, your responsibility is to take responsibility for that privilege and to help other people with it. Okay, to help people who are less privileged. But it's not to feel guilty about your privilege, not to feel ashamed about your privilege. That doesn't tend to help people. That just tends to make yourself feel worse. And then consequently make other people feel worse about you and about society. That's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. It really isn't. So anyway, diversity, right? So does this seem like a view, this diversity pyramid and this privilege walk and everything that I've been talking about, does this seem like the kind of view that propagates intellectual diversity? I mean, really, does this seem like something that is genuinely made to actually have, express diverse sorts of views? So I was started to think about this and I'm like, this ideal diversity at this college seems to always propagate. This is low key hypocritical what they're thinking of. So the tensions came to a boil in my sophomore year when I went to a hall counselor meeting, and all of my friends know this story. I tell this story endlessly, but since you guys are a new audience, you guys should hear about this story too. I was in my hall sophomore year hall, and my hall counselor is a big social justice warrior, big Black Lives Matter person, etc. She convenes this hall meeting. And we're all asked to bring elements of our cultural background. Okay. So we all come in. I'm like, well, I felt particularly prickly that day. So everybody comes in. Okay. And then there's some international students that come in and they're like, okay, everybody share 3 elements of your cultural heritage. And so, my redneck friend brought things from North Carolina. My Korean friend brought things from Korea, brought some ramen or whatever. There were some international students that brought some Mexican things. And then it came to me. And I was like, okay, here's 3 items of my cultural heritage. I pull out my Constitution, a paper target that I shot at a shooting range, and a Redskins cap. And I say to my hall counselor, and I had reasons for everything. I said, look, this is my Constitution. I was born in this country. I was raised in this country. I love this country. And also, Here's my paper target that I shot bullet holes in. I love hanging around with rednecks. They're my favorite people. My pastor, paid for this. I love hanging around and shooting targets with him. And this is, you could tell she started to get very flustered. And she started to say, well, there's rednecks. That's kind of an issue in society right now. And it's like, what do you mean? What's the issue in society? I like hanging around with them. They're good people. And she's like, well, what about like white supremacy? I'm like, well, I'm hanging around white people right now. I don't really sense the supremacy. I mean, I'm definitely not white. But anyway, but going back to that, then I pull out my Redskins cap and I say, look, this is my Redskins cap. And she said, oh, that name is offensive. And I say, oh, well, I love football. I was raised with it. It's my favorite sport, and this is all true, by the way. All these things are true. I love country music and I love Redskins football. I grew up with it, and this is something that I deeply value. And at this point, she's exploding. So she literally like comes up to the front of the room and she's like, okay, guys, look, there are some people who believe that Asian people are actually white. And my jaw just dropped. And I was like, what? I was like, you think I'm white? And she said, well, what you're doing is you're defending white supremacy. I'm like, what are you talking about? All of these things are critical elements to my cultural heritage and what I believe in and who I care about. And what I care about. I was born in this country. I was raised in this country. How dare you call me something that I'm not? How dare you try to put me in a box? And that's what the left does. They put you in a box that you did not necessarily agree to be in. Your box is if you're black or if you're Hispanic or if you're Asian. Your box is if you're a male or a man or a woman or whatever gender they want to call you. But you're designed to be oppressed. You're designed to find a victim story about yourself. What a horrible way of living your life. What a horrible way of calling people out. What a horrible way of thinking, to think that because Asian Americans achieve at the same level white people, that they are white. Because that's what she was trying to get at. I know it. And what a very, very narrow provincial view of life that is, that your race defines you. How is that a statement admitting the strength of our diversity? Does our diversity come from the fact that we look different, or does our diversity come from the fact that we bring different ideas to the table? And how do you negotiate a diverse society? Do you treat people based on their color? Or do you treat people as people and learn to get to know them and actually what motivates them and gets to know them? All of those things that I brought in, sure, they were a little bit snarky. Maybe they weren't Chinese. Maybe that's what she wanted. She wanted me to bring a Chinese, some dragon or paper lantern or something like that. But no, this is all true. I was born in this country. I was born in Maryland. I was raised here. This is the country that I know. This is the only country that I know, and this is the country that I love, and I have to defend it. This is what's going on in our country, guys. From my experience, Vince Dao's experience, everything like that. We have to stand up for what we're standing up for. That's why what Vince said was very relevant. In 10 years, you're not going to remember your critics. We're living in a time right now where young people can't handle other opinions or criticism, and that's exactly why that we need to come and tackle the culture together, because we need to expose their breaking point. This is what this podcast, An Inconvenient Minority, is all about. We're breaking the codex. We're breaking the code because they have a framework of mind, a matrix that puts that puts race at the center of everything. That puts a certain view of race at the center of everything. And if you disagree, if you inconvenience it in some way, you deserve to be canceled. And I don't believe that. And that's why I'm here today talking with Vince, talking with all of these people on this podcast, to show that life in America is much, much greater than just your race. There's so many aspects that form your identity and your background to truly get to know people instead of just looking at their skin color. Thank you for listening to the Inconvenient Minority Podcast. Leave me a review. I'd greatly appreciate it. And I'm excited to see you next time. Bye.